You have a mechanism in your brain. That's how they were able to find it. They don't understand minds at all. But in your brain, which immediately files away these fears. You startle, and your brain immediately categorizes fear, and you've got something else that's weighing you down in consciousness, right? Because another fear is there. So by the time you're even your age or my age, you're full of fears, and those are totally unnecessary fears.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master Sun Qing, and I have another gift from the universe. Every day I wake up and it's just like Christmas. I'm so grateful to be in the presence of Roberta Grimes, and she is an attorney and has many hats as to her offerings to the universe and how she explores it in her consciousness today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm very, very excited to have you here, my friend. And why don't we start off with just a little bit of a background and entry level to how we got here today?
Well, when I was 8 years old, I had an experience of light, which made me know that there's a lot more than we can see. When you're 8, you think everything is normal. I thought it was normal. It wasn't normal at all. So I never asked a question. I never got an answer. I ended up majoring in Christian history in college, thinking that's where I'd get my answer. No answers, because I didn't ask any questions. So then I decided I would research the afterlife. And fortunately, this was mid-70s when the interest started in the afterlife. And so in old bookstores, I found the most amazing, wonderful books. Primarily, they were written by people who had been researching deep trance mediums in the latter part of the 19th, early part of the 20th century. So that's where my initial knowledge came from. I spent 2 years immersed in what had come through back then when we really did have good mediums. The deep trance mediums were the best. And at the end of that time, I knew life is eternal. I mean, it was impossible for there to be such consistency across the eastern United States, southern England. That's where the two places they were most active. But we couldn't have had so much consistency among, where it was impossible for there to be any copying among all these hundreds of different accounts if it wasn't real. So I discovered it was real. So that was when I actually, because I had been reading the Bible all my life, and I then suddenly knew a lot about the afterlife, and I discovered, guess who else knew all about the afterlife? Jesus. There were things in the Gospels, which I had read hundreds of, maybe 50 times in my life. There were things in the Gospels that you couldn't understand if you didn't also understand the afterlife evidence, which boggled my mind. I mean, when you start there, you want to keep studying this stuff. This is a very, very, very fascinating whole field when it all jibes. Not with Christianity at all, which is not a religion that Jesus started. It's a bogus religion. It was started by the Romans under the Roman Emperor Constantine. But Jesus, for the first 300 years after his death, when they were following his way, millions of people became followers of Jesus before they ended up on crosses. But he said things that made me know he knew exactly this. He didn't have to do the research, of course. He had come to us from there, but he knew all about the afterlife. So, bingo. So I've been teaching this ever since.
Wow. It's not the first thing. So you wouldn't put yourself in the category of Christian?
No, I'm a follower of Jesus, not a Christian.
Yeah. It's interesting because every time I come across someone who confesses as being Christian, they don't sort of accept the idea of energy and people being able to supposedly create wonderment outside of what Jesus or God can create.
But Jesus talked about it they don't read the Bible. They don't actually read the Gospels, these people. It's the religion I was a faithful Christian till I was, past 50. But I have to tell you, the religion is bogus. The history tells us it's bogus. We know how it was created. But they just took Jesus's name. Nothing that he taught is taught by the churches. Think about that. That's awful.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of like it goes under the category of organized religion, but on steroids, really doctored stuff that can't be validated. It's more skewed to prey on people's fear and then keep them
It's
sort of
fear-based. That's the problem. Jesus
creative
is
in the model.
love-based. You
Yeah.
can't have Christianity and Jesus both. You have to choose. That
Wow.
was what in the end made me understand. I just had to get out of that religion altogether. I used to go to church just to please my husband, whom I love, but he finally understood, no, I wasn't going to do it anymore.
So the crossover, I find it intriguing. So your revelation when you came to this sort of epiphany that Jesus is not an embodiment of Christianity, or Christianity is an embodiment of Jesus. So where was the threshold that you stepped past the veil?
Well, I
In,
learned it really in college because I was studying early Christian history, and the woman who was my advisor probably was there at the Council of Nicaea in the year 325. I mean, that's how old she was. And she was quite bitter about Christianity and the way that the Romans had put it together and all of that. And you probably can't learn this stuff nowadays, even in college. They probably protect people from knowing the truth, but Jesus said the truth will set you free. And I was free of Christianity by the time I got out of college. It just took me another 25 years to realize I really had to make a choice, because they didn't even take anything Jesus taught when they made the religion. They tried to kill off all his followers, just take his name because he was very famous even back then. And they took his name, they added bogus ideas, and said, hey, here we are, we're a new religion. And they went out and conquered the world with their religion, which is now the prominent religion of the world.
it's really interesting. I mean, that's kind of like the blueprint for most megalomaniacs through the history of the human race. And when they adopt some type of ideology, belief system, however you want to put it, because we go through spirituality, atheism, religion, and it seems to be cyclical. And I tend to dip in both ponds because Taoism is in the category of a philosophy, but I'm ordained as a Taoist priest in two lineages of Taoism. One is 66 generation holder, the other one 126 generation holder, and it is the foundation of it is all in deep into internal alchemy and all spirit based high consciousness related stuff that can be transmuted into your 3D reality. And so where is it the representation? Because I've heard many stories. I would not confess to be an expert by any means or even really understand Jesus. I come across him quite often, many times in the course of a day, working with people around the world, and they're very much immersed in the transmission of his presence and what he means to them within their own experience. But there's this sort of understanding I want to know more about, and I've never really sat down and had this conversation with him, even though I've seen him very present in physical healings and things of that nature. But it's more there's a name that people call him, not Jehovah. No, there's another one. It's called
Yeshua?
yes. And so, what's the relevance of Yeshua? And from everything I've discovered about Jesus, he was this incredible healer that had all this
Yes, but
insight into mastering this sort of like way of living.
he used the energies and the beliefs of the people he was healing. He would always ask them, do you believe I can do this? And they would say, oh, yes, oh, yes. And then he would say, well, then you are healed. And that, to me, that is very profound. But he understood consciousness much better than almost anybody now understands consciousness. And coming to understand that boggled my mind, because I didn't understand much of anything about consciousness till maybe 10 years ago. And now having done all the research, I'm very confident everything he understood was right. But I'm teaching a course right now, which I'll probably continue to teach, on the reason he actually came to earth. It wasn't to save us from God's anger at our sins. None of that. That all came from that was fear-based, and it all came from the Romans. But he came because he was so frustrated watching people come to earth over and over and over again and not make any spiritual progress. We come to earth to make spiritual progress. It's not happening. And he couldn't stand it anymore. He didn't have to come back. He had to negotiate with God to come back. But he did. And he told me this whole story. I have it directly from Jesus, why he came back and what it was all about. He came back to teach us how to make this our last necessary earth lifetime, period. And all those teachings of Jesus, nearly all of them, are designed around a method which is so sure and so quick because it's based on consciousness. He knew all that stuff. And so I'm teaching it. And actually, it's going very well. He taught some things that technically are not in the Gospels because they're mechanical ways to manipulate consciousness. And he taught those ways. And my spirit guide has shown me what those ways were. And they work so beautifully. So yeah, you want to make, I don't care how old you are. If you want to make this your last necessary earth lifetime, I can show you what Jesus came to teach us. Which means months. That's all it takes is months.
Right. So let's talk more about that. You're notioning or inferring mechanical processes. What exactly does that mean?
You understand that the lowest level of consciousness is fear, hatred, anger, all the other issue emotions. And so, which is one reason why religions are so useless spiritually, because they all are based in fear. Traditional religions, probably not yours, but Christianity
useful to manipulate people.
Yeah, right. But that's why the Romans created Christianity specifically as a way to control the masses. That's what it's all about, and it's very good at that. You should know a Catholic. It's very good at that. But but the absolute highest aspect of consciousness is perfect love. And it's a spectrum, highest to lowest or lowest to highest. And so because life is so tough on earth, we tend to get dragged down by it. We naturally are vibrating, if without the matter around us, much higher than we vibrate while we're on earth. And so the reason he taught forgiveness so excessively, and he taught love too, but most people think he just taught, you should love and forgive us if you possibly can. That's all they think Jesus taught. But it's a system for raising your vibrations very rapidly. And the first thing you have to do is get control of the fact that your mind is constantly doing what it needed to do when you were a caveman. It needed to create fears. And we're born just with two fears, fear of falling and fear of loud noises. That's it. But if you're a little cave tot, you have to be afraid of a lot of things, strangers and, saber-toothed tigers and all the things. And, even being out of sight of mom, you've got to be afraid of all of that if you're a tiny tot. And so you have a mechanism in your mind, which science has just found, by the way. I could show you an article. Science has found that mechanism. You have a mechanism in your brain. That's how they were able to find it. They don't understand minds at all. But in your brain, which immediately files away these fears. You startle, and your brain immediately categorizes fear, and you got something else that's weighing you down in consciousness, right? Because another fear is there. So by the time you're even your age or my age, you're full of fears, and those are totally unnecessary fears. And as I say, part of it is fear of strangers, fear of other people, but also angers fit in there because, if your tribe goes to war, you have to develop angers and righteous anger and all of these different kinds of angers. Oh, file that away too. So we really get messed up. And so what Jesus taught is a method for getting rid of all of those fears. And we call it forgiveness balls. I don't know what he called it. But what you do is you just, with your arms, and I'm doing this with my arms, very big sweeps of your arms, you gather up all of those fears. Every fear in your mind, everything you've ever been afraid of, everybody you've ever been angry with, you put yourself in there too, and you gather them all up and you squash them into a nice, tight ball. And then you push that ball away while you slowly say, and really mean this, I love you, I forgive you, I forgive, and I release. Jesus taught this very exercise, according to my spirit guide who was there. And if it doesn't work the first time and they're all gone, you do it again. I had to do this. I had set aside 2 weeks of my life to do it in 2011. Since then, I've never had to do it. And I've never been afraid of anything again. I used to be terrified of the dark. Now I sit in the dark all night long. I don't care. I'm not afraid of nuclear war. I'm not afraid of anything. And that's the basis, because once you clean out all this negativity, you've spent your life sticking into your mind without knowing it was so dangerous, it's easy then for you to rise. In fact, you start loving other people. And you think at first you're loving your family less, but it's just that you're loving other people more the same, which is what's supposed to happen. And I've never had to do another forgiveness ball. It's just not a big deal. But eventually, within about 5 years, my guide told me that now that I've had my last necessary earth lifetime, he said, I'm going to come back to teach, but I won't have to. I'm already level 5, upper level, a part of level 5. It's easy though. I mean, that's the thing that's so frustrating. We can do it in one lifetime. I don't care who you are, you can do it in one lifetime.
It's so interesting, the parallels. Within Taoism, we attribute any sort of like 3D reality remnants, i.e., physical sickness, to the storing of these emotions that you store within the physical flesh.
It's all one. Yes, yes.
And
you can forgive your illness too and make it go away. Exactly right. Exactly right.
And I sort of, how I do it is I teach people how to realize their emotions don't control them; they control their emotions. And so, all of a sudden, understanding that you can resonate in this love, this universal love. There's always an entry level to this. I believe how powerful the message is that you're sending, and also teaching people to just engulf themselves with all the things that are the trappings of this big hug and release cycle of healing, which is so powerful. Just the messaging, and then the intent and the knowing that you have when you're delivering that. I'm sure there may be a few little extra bits and pieces that you're using to help people validate.
We use the teachings of Jesus, what he actually said,
Mm-hmm.
what he really meant when he said it, which now we can understand a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing the pilot course now, and we're filming it. And then I think I'm just going to keep doing it, I think, because already I've got people reaching out who want to be in the second one. But it's helping people so much already who are in this course. We have people from all over the world, 5 from Australia, several from Europe, one of them from Serbia. I mean, all over the world, people are resonating with the truth. The truth will set you free. It really, really will.
Yeah, it is. It's such a powerful messaging. I sort of observe, until otherwise notified, humans sort of relate to what you're speaking of. Sort of, they're introspective, analytical, negative in their nature. They're fear-based, they're fight or flight, all that kind of like instinctual survival, like instinct, reproduce and survive another day. That's sort of like the human expression of what you know until you know more, which is sort of like what consciousness is. So they come up and they end up being exposed to the incredible teachings that you're offering, Roberta, and all of a sudden they know a hell of a lot more than what they assumed they knew, and just resonating with the very messaging that you're putting out there. So when you do this sort of practice and you used Jesus's techniques, you inferred there's sort of like a process, maybe a couple of weeks, a month, or a couple of months. How long does it take for you to?
I'm doing a 3-month course, and we're now 2/3 of the way through it,
Mhm.
and already, sort of the quickest people in that class, are already deep into the love part. The love part comes naturally. But as the people who took the forgiveness part as seriously, and we do have some other things too. One of the things we begin with is keeping a gratitude journal and
Mhm.
writing down why we're grateful for each of those things. And I tell people try to do it for a year because it really opens your mind so much on a basic spiritual level to what we need to be grateful for. We're so closed in spiritually. And again, I blame Christianity for that. Christianity teaches you that, well, talk about guilt. Want to feel guilty? Jesus had to die because you're so sinful. What I mean, you killed Jesus. What a terrible thing to tell people, but they do. So we forgive all that,
Yeah.
and
So
it's easy after that.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it does kind of seem that way. I find that until otherwise notified, we kind of use three stages of awareness within Taoism. It starts with love, because love is very subjective until otherwise. Because you mention it, and it could mean razor blades and bunny rabbits to one person, and rainbows and unicorns to another, until they start uh, accessing this resonance that is universal, that is what we would define as that universal love. There's a subjective sort of filtering that takes place from that human experience. And they sort of get an idea of the hallmark version as opposed to this universal, you am I am you, we are one. And so, what is there to be afraid of? And it always comes back with this sort of like narrative. And then we sort of move to gratitude, and gratitude is sort of like far more a much easier, less effort access point. If you give someone $1 or a compliment, they're going to access gratitude. And then finally, we sort of immerse ourselves in what we call accepting all, accept and allow everything as one, which it may be very much like your love that you speak of, that Jesus talks about, that
Yeah.
resonance, that high
It's
resonance.
very different from the kind of love most people think of. Most people
Yeah.
think love is very subjective, and actually what Jesus teaches is that kind of love, we call it special loves, are as counterproductive spiritually as our special hates. Think about that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because we're here to learn universal love for all people, and even then, ultimately, love for all creatures. And that's
Yeah.
what we're here to do. And so, in order to do that, we start with gratitude. Same stuff you're doing, only just a slightly different order.
Hmm.
And we go to forgiveness, which is the big one. That's hard for people because I hear stories all the time. Well, I could not forgive this. I couldn't forgive that. What if? Oh, I say no. Jesus says there is no that he calls that the miracle, and he says there miracles have no size. Once you really understand forgiveness, doesn't matter what's done. They murdered your family at Auschwitz. Doesn't matter because it's not real anyway. Here's the big secret. This is not real. It's just an illusion. It's all in consciousness, and it's in the consciousness of God, really. God made it up as a place for us to learn these truths. And then they get that. They say, oh, really? Okay. All right, let's go for it. But by using Jesus, who is the most popular person in the world, one or two on every possible measure nowadays, when they measure who's most popular, it's easier for people who have been Christian all their lives and they still have the residual fear of not being Christian. I'm scared because what if I die and I was wrong and I should have stayed a Christian? This way, they can stay a follower of Jesus and learn the truth from him. And they're usually outraged when they see how different what Jesus actually taught, black letter or red letter, in the Gospels, well, how different what he taught is from what they learned from the Christians. Why didn't I learn this? Why didn't they tell me this? Because it would have made you free. It would have made you happy. It would have taught you spiritual things that they don't want you to know because they want you to sit in that pew and put the money in the till. That's the way it is.
So, we seem to come to this consensus. There's very much some type of like resonating theme through a lot of belief systems that can become more universal, very similar to the Jesus that you speak of. It sounds to me like the Tao, which we call the mother of all things, which would be equivalent to your God, Jesus, God, whatever. It's an interesting universal thing that you come to, but it's sort of like the evolution of a human realization of this thread that we're all sort of like connected to, which is this oneness.
Yeah,
And
which is oneness. Yes.
yeah.
You know, God doesn't take a form. God is consciousness. That's what God is. The top part of consciousness is God.
Hmm.
And Jesus said that. He said God is spirit. And if you want to worship God, you need to worship in spirit and in truth. So what the Christians did, because trinities were very, very popular in ancient religions right around the time they were starting Christianity. I mean, they had them in all kinds. I mean, I used to be able to recite the religions that had them, but the Egyptians certainly had them, and several other religions had trinities. And so, because they were starting a new religion, I mean, we had the Father, we had the Son, obviously Jesus. We need a third. Oh, Jesus said God is spirit. That's it, the Holy Spirit. So they created their own Trinity. There is no Trinity. I mean, there's really only one God. And God's servant, Jesus, came to teach us how to make this our last necessary earth lifetime. And it was it was the Christians who made Jesus into this figure, a tragic figure, who was pure. And because he was pure, he was a pure enough sacrifice, following the traditions of the ancient Hebrews, right? Had to have a blemish-free sacrifice. And he was blemish free so they could sacrifice him to God and our sins are gone. That's what they made up.
And so looking at that and how you have sourced this information directly from Jesus yourself, how do you how what's your journey in more detail to, I mean, I guess we're going to call this category of channeling, your exploration of that and sourcing information. What's your journey in that lane? How's that been for you?
I don't channel myself. I'm used as a channel, which is different. Many people kind of want to be a channel and they practice writing and try to get a connection.
Hmm.
Didn't happen to me. What happened to me was that my guide came out to me in 2015 and early 2015, and he basically told me I was screwing everything up because I was supposed to have written this book called Liberating Jesus. And now you have to write it. But I didn't feel qualified to write Liberating Jesus, which is a wonderful book. I just didn't feel qualified. He said, you have to write it. I'm your guide. I'm telling you, it's against the rules for them to come out to us like this to begin with. He was breaking all the rules. And my guide in his next to last lifetime was a famous person. So he even had to tell me who he had been in order to kind of beat me over the head with it. You got to write this book. So I said, okay, I'll do my best. I didn't know I wasn't going to have to write it because it was going to be channeled. And I didn't know it was going to be channeled by Jesus. They didn't let me in on that part of it. But when I sat down to write, it just flowed. The whole thing came out of my computer in 2 weeks. I couldn't stop. My fingers wouldn't stop writing. And that was how I discovered, I'm channeling this book. But it was, and I even was hearing Jesus talking in my head. It was quite amazing.
And so that entry level, you just woke up one day and it was beknownst to you, you're just this vehicle for
Yeah,
Jesus.
it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I checked it. I thought, oh, why am I awake at 2? I ran to my computer and I started writing, and everything came out. But he used me as a word processor. I've channeled. Now I know I'm a pretty good channel, and so I've channeled other books too. But he just was, and only later when I realized he was talking, did I realize I was maybe hearing Jesus's thoughts. But it was quite a powerful presence. Oh my word! It was It was a baptism under fire for sure.
And was that just evident when you woke up? So his presence didn't represent itself in sort of some sort of physical sort of heart palpitation or chest weight, that type of thing.
No, but he toned himself down hugely.
Hmm.
I have since been in April of 2022, my spirit guide took me to meet with him because they wanted me to create teachingsbyjesus.com, which is a website which teaches his teachings. And so he took me to meet with Jesus. I got to meet him. But that was an overwhelming experience because I met him in the astral plane and where he, I guess, spends a lot of his time and on time. There's no time there. And he had toned himself down. I couldn't even get near him. It was overwhelming how much energy in the astral, we recognize one another by our energy signature. And usually it's high notes, low notes. It's unique. I mean, when you can choose to look like a rabbit, and if you see one of your friends, they know right away who you are because of your energy signature. His energy signature is unique. It is all one very high note with no variation whatsoever. And it is so overwhelmingly strong that if he doesn't tone it down, you can't even get near him.
Right.
That's how powerful he is. Yes. It's very amazing.
Yeah. The funny part is when I've been teaching astral projection out of bodies. We call it soul projection for over 30 years. And the first time I channeled my teacher is Latsu, the guy who created the
Really,
Tao.
he's a famous guy too.
Yeah, I basically have him present at all times and access point of information at will. And it's funny when you mention you could sit there and keep writing. If I didn't need sustenance of water or food, I could never end the information that just runs from the very messaging. And you can transmit it in different ways, whether I'm just creating material for him or I want to concentrate it as an actual experience where you do a session, other people talk to him, and you transmute him through your physical body. And then there's levels of mediumship where you're just communicating with other entities that may not necessarily be using your whole body as a vehicle. And so there's all these variables. But the first time I ever experienced that, it was a surge of energy that was overwhelming, took over the whole room. There was about
huge.
people in the room. And so when Latsu came into my body, it was as if I was in a sauna. I just started internal combustion. There was so much heat. And, it's just a state of awareness. And the information just flows through you. I always love watching people because there's this, as you said, it's like, I'm not channeling or I'm channeling. There's a distinct difference. When people start sitting there processing and going, and I think, and there's a degree. First, I measure the actual transmission, and then I start looking at the auras. Then I start assessing the validation of this information, because some people are, as you said, there's this Hollywood version of it where they would like to, but they haven't been sort of like been given the opportunity to, and they want it so bad that they just start making things up in their head. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You've got to start somewhere.
But it's not channeling. No,
It's
there's
not,
no.
it's not
You
channeling.
know when you're channeling because it's not you writing those words.
It's a
I didn't know
blank.
what the book was even about till it was over, and I actually read it. I was
And
amazed. It's
well,
amazing.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I've written several books in like a day, and it just depends on the level of how fast I can either auto transcribe it. And now with AI, it's very easy. You just sit there and it just comes out, and I just keep speaking. And I don't like typing anyway, so it happens very, very quickly. And so, this whole thing where people are sort of struggling with it, and they get into this sort of, and I appreciate the fact that everyone has their entropy level, whether it comes from actual a certain state or they want it really bad enough. If you keep asking the universe, it will happen. But there seems to be a lot of this sort of fake it till you make it stuff, and that's okay.
Yes.
But it's like you will, when you watch me channel, which, and my wife freaks out, I don't blink, and people are like, what? You've been talking for half an hour and you don't blink, because there's there's information that comes through, and I'm not filtering it, I'm not processing it. It's just comes out as you understand exactly what I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah. I
about.
didn't know what I was writing.
That charge that you and I are having right now is a complete validation of that, because that is exactly what we're speaking of. It's a
Yeah,
fluidity that doesn't have to be altered. We're not sitting there processing. And I think, no, you'll watch someone channel information and it is nonstop, because the source is the source. You don't have to process whether you have to think whether something's coming out. It's
yeah,
information, and there's this, it's profound to witness and
yeah,
experience these
it
types of
is.
things. But there's a lot of there seems to me, because I mean I've been teaching this stuff for 30 years, there's a lot of people that are um, really want it really bad, but with that, be careful what you want. You may not get it because you want it so badly. And it's not
Yeah,
a it's like a it's not, everyone has the ability. There's no one that can't do it. It's just about, okay, how are you going to get into that? I had my mother in a channeling workshop I did about 20 years ago, and one of the students in there started to show, I was watching the entities moving in and out of her field, and she was very confessed obsessed person with wanting to be an exorcist. I was like, okay, whatever. I mean, look, you have this Hollywood version of what you want to see. You will transmute it. You will call on it. It will come to you. And so she started basically transmitting this energy. And the student that was transcribing her information, I just got her to pause for it. And then I started a dialogue. And then all of a sudden, the whole level of it changed tonality. And next minute, she spins around 360 and gets thrown across the room, and my mother dies. And she goes, "This is real." And I said, "Yeah, you know, this is a complete manufactured connection that student has with what she considers her idea of what this is." Understand that, and people don't get that. It's like you're the one bringing these. Everything you're
oh,
experiencing is
yeah,
that
so I wouldn't
because
mess with
of what
any of
you.
those entities.
Yeah, but
I'm
you know,
I'm always asking for Jesus' protection, my guide's protection. Oh, yeah.
and that, but isn't it funny though, Roberta? These are present, and honestly, I could literally spend, 10 years and not see a lower frequency energy like that, which someone would define as Satan, demons, whatever you want to call it. I
Demons,
just look
yeah.
at it as I just call it a low frequency, and it presents itself however that person has transmuted it. But they disappear in seconds. My negotiation with an entity like that takes about 3 seconds. All you do is give it love, and it's gone. It doesn't even give you a directive.
Yeah.
It's like the
They never
directive.
get close to me. I'm very well protected, and I'm very grateful for that.
And but I mean, a lot of that has to do. Well, I know all of it has to do with the person's experience. So they want this stuff so bad, and they bring it to them, which is okay. I mean, literally, it's another expression of just consciousness. But people tend to
But
sort
it's
of
a very low
frame it out.
vibration consciousness. I tell
Sure.
people, "You don't wanna mess with that. Just you don't have to."
Well, that's the part that when they come up, they end up on your doorstep or mine. This comes to a realization, but there's also a level of, I'm curious. I want to know more about this type of stuff. And it just, as Tom Campbell would say, it's like the large consciousness system is giving to you what you can take at this particular time.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So it's like, okay, so you entertain the fantasy of killing the dragon, cutting its head off, whatever it is. It's where you're at in your own steps up the mountain. And it's sort
Mhm.
of funny how people sort of get there. But this whole channeling thing is huge, and there are so many people that are doing it now. 30 years ago, when I was doing it, people would go, "Well, what do you do for a living?" "Oh, well, I'm a Taoist priest." "Oh, okay. Well, what do you do?" "Well, I do exorcisms, house clearings, past life readings, clairvoyance, mediumship, channeling, whatever." It's all categories under one thing. And people would just be like, "Holy moly, did you really answer that question with that?" And now these days, you mention that type of stuff, and people are like, "Oh, yeah, my friend's a channeler," or look on YouTube or Yelp, and there's a million of these
Yeah.
people, and I think it's really exciting. It's an exciting time. And then there's this part where over the last probably 12 weeks, I've never seen this before in 30 years. Over the last 12 weeks, I've been seeing dozens of alien entities in people's fields, which I find very, very interesting. All of a sudden, there's some flash fire sale on this type of stuff. And it's never been something that I've ever come across personally. And I've come across a lot of entities and
Are they
spirits.
grays or some other?
They're blue, they're gray, they're big, they're small, they're orange, they're lizards, they're lions. I mean,
Lizards are the bad ones. Yeah.
yeah, they're
Stay away
in
from
all different types of forms. And and the people look at me because at face value they sort of think I'm kind of benign. Oh, you're this priest. Oh, you want to interview me? Oh, whatever. Next minute I start explaining, reading their aura, and they flip out and go, "You could see that?" I'm like, "Absolutely. Anyone can train to see." This is a thing that people need to understand. There is not a single thing that whatever Roberta and I do or anyone else does that you can't be trained to do. And I've been doing it for 30 years, and I train people in all these sensory perceptions. It's a cultivational practice. It's not something, when you read someone's energy, for example, all I'm doing is looking at all the energy centers, we call them dantians in the body, and the information is sitting there. It's like as if it's on a computer screen. And all I do is read off the information, whether you're in excess or deficiency of whatever that channel is. And it gives me a very clear picture of your mental, emotional, and physical state. And but the biggest thing that I always let people know is when you don't make it about yourself, and it's not attributed to whether you're going to be called the most badass, clairvoyant, psychic individual, and you're not invested in it, and you are able to observe the information, and you are as one the present moment, which is where you get this stuff from. It just presents itself, and people are like, how? What? It's that easy. But you have to feel this palpability. From my practice within Taoism, we train you in the internal alchemy, as in the architecture of the energetic field, so that you can repeat it over and over and over again. It's not sort of a fleeting moment. I had a moment, I saw a little bit here, a little bit there. I had this really super energetic charge. I got a great channeling one day, didn't do it the other. No, there's fundamental processes that you can use to practice in your own development that you can repeat it on a daily basis. So it's not something that you have to just sort of have a one-hit wonder and you're like, oh man, I wish I could do that. I did that once when I was a teenager, or I did it once and it was never repeatable again. That's the one thing that people get drawn to about Taoist alchemy practices is they're repeatable. And that's where most people don't get to see that because it's sort of been held in secrecy. But I mean, every single belief system, including Jesus, has a system of healing. Just as you expressed with the audience, there's a certain system, the way that he helps people envelop love and dissolve all these fears that are humanists in their basis and creating this higher resonation. There's a way to get there. And when you follow that, man, it's incredible. And when, just sampling the energies that you transmit is incredible, Roberta. It's like, this is what this whole experience is about, in my opinion. But when you're channeling, so you go beyond channeling, do you teach people this stuff, or is it just something that you use?
The channeling is just what Jesus and my guide Thomas used to get the books out they want to get out. I don't channel for anyone but them.
Right.
Thomas channeled through me a book called The Fun of Loving Jesus, Embracing the Christianity that Jesus Taught. And there was the book. It just went, and I had no idea. I said, okay, so should we publish this? He said, not yet. So we just finally published it last year. That was when it was almost 10 years after I wrote it. So again, I didn't know what I was writing. I just knew that he wanted me to write. It was the right time because I had the time then to write it and, maybe polish it some and put it away. But I just channel for them. I don't channel for anyone else.
So it's not part of the teachings of Jesus that you share with your the people that you guide.
How to channel? No. But Jesus wants us to serve. And I gave my life to God in 2009, and that was something which my guide prompted me to do. So now I'm serving, and so that's the way they wanted me to serve. I mean, it was his impulse that I give my life to God, so I did. But it's again, too many people. It's the big danger that if things start going really well for you and you start having maybe a bestseller and you have this and you start thinking, I'm hot stuff. And you think it's about you, and none of it is. This is all, we are all servants. We're servants of God. We're servants of our fellow man. I'm Jesus's personal servant. I now understand. And it's a joy to be in service. I don't care that anyone ever knows my name or remembers my name, but I want the work to be done perfectly. If we can make it possible for it to be done perfectly, I'm trying.
And so when they embody I don't know what you would define it, ascension process of Jesus to never be reincarnated. Is it to not be reincarnated again in the earth plane? What's the purpose of the
It's not having to learn any more material-based lessons, matter-based lessons.
Okay.
Yes, there are some other planets where people can incarnate, but the problem is the same. If we don't know why because we have amnesia for why we're there or why we're here. If we don't know why we're here, we don't know how to get out of it, right? We keep turning, as the Buddhists say, turning on the wheel. And Jesus couldn't stand watching people turning on the wheel. So he said, I'm going to just show everybody how to do this and make it your last earth lifetime. And in the Gospels, there are hints that that was what he was up to, but the people listening had no idea. Even though he told them what he was doing, they had no idea what he meant. It was like a 21st century man in a, first century world. That's what he really was. Farther ahead even than the 21st century. And so they didn't understand what he was teaching or why. They thought he was just trying to get them to love one another, which is he was doing, but there were reasons for that. There were reasons for everything he taught, much bigger than the religion ever has told people.
And the healing practices, I've heard many stories from other people that I've helped find their path or their attunement and their affinity with Jesus, and there's sort of like this underpinnings of this mystical sort of energetic training. Is there any relevance to that or any validity?
Yeah. Jesus said, if you have this much faith, as much faith as a grain of mustard seed, that's how little you have to believe you can do it. You can tell a mountain, move from here to there, or throw yourself in the sea, and the mountain will obey you. I mean, that's pretty big. He taught, as I said, whenever he was healing someone, and he healed a lot of people, he always first asked them, do you believe I can do this? And he used their energy as well as his own to make the healing happen.
Mm.
And it's not recorded that he ever failed at that kind of a healing. Even arguably, he raised Lazarus from the dead. I'm not sure he was really dead. He was only partly dead, but he did all, and he certainly, without a question, he raised his own body after it was killed on the cross. He raised it, and he used it for 2 or 3 days, but it was already rotting, so he threw it away and used an astral body for the next 40 days before he ascended.
Yeah, it's so palpable when you start validating this stuff. I had my first gateway experience when I first started this journey, and it was just an awareness that comes with a reality. Transferring from something very physical into this sort of plane of internal awareness. I went from very physical stuff to internal awareness and the path of the priest and training in this sort of internal awakening. And, the first thing I ever experienced was I'd never meditated before. So I sat down and found this woman that was teaching it. She was some grandmaster or something at some youth center. And it was in some ghetto. And I was like, I don't know what this is. This is way back in the day. So this is over 30 years ago. And so I turn up there and I get down in a lotus position, which I feel like this big overgrown ape. I couldn't say I came from bodybuilding, powerlifting, so I couldn't sit in that position comfortably. My back was aching. And I'm sitting there with a half a dozen misfits that were clearly just looking for something outside of their insanity of their life. And this woman is saying she's going to teach you how to meditate. And she was some grandmaster of something. And I personally, my cynicism was sort of more like, oh, this is some person trying to write off their nonprofit organization or something. And they're doing this thing in a church. And it was actually a youth center. And, this is what's going on. And so I sat there, and there's noise in the outside. You got people screaming, dogs barking, cars driving by. And I'm thinking, I don't know what meditation is, but it's not going to, I don't see this as working, right? I don't know what she wants me to do, but I'm not going to, from my Hollywood version, sit here and be still. My back is aching. I couldn't do it. And so she sits there, she goes, now I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to let everything fall away and take a deep breath in. And I'll tell you, Roberta, the second I took a deep breath in and her voice disappeared and so did everything around me, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm hooked. Give me another version of that. That was my gateway drug to what I've been experiencing for 30 years. And so this awareness, this ability to shift your consciousness at will is 100% tangible and can be obtained by anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I just had, an awareness of my eternal immortal self from many lifetimes before this one. And it just came to be realized. And of course, it continued with being fed with this obsession by literally within the same week witnessing physical healings to the extent of gangrenous tissue turning back to pink flesh in 40 minutes. That was my first event. And I was like, I'm hooked. And ever since then, it's on a daily basis that these type of miracles are things that I witness and can teach people how to do. And I had this conversation with Tom Campbell. Tom Campbell was like, oh yeah, I've done that before. And this is what I found really refreshing, because until I, meet a student and I teach them these type of healing abilities, it's conceptual to most people. They've heard stories, they've never seen it, they've never experienced it, they don't know what it is. And then, you get this where grandma's in a coma, they come to you and they're freaking out and you're saying, don't worry about it, tune in. And next minute, grandma is supposed to be dead in the next 6 hours, wakes up with regular vitals and goes about her business. And I explained that to Tom and he goes, yeah, I've done that many times. And I'm like, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. That is resonance. And that's where we separate electromagnetic to resonance. And for a Taoist, it's like duality is dissolved. You go up and yin and yang, each side of the mountain, you come together, you merge as one. And that is true resonance. That's what we call the Qi, Tao, God, Jesus, a resonance that is a frequency beyond anything within this earth plane. And then you bring it into this space and it's realized there. It's like, because that's who you really are. That's the nature of who you really are. And this human expression is sort of like a slither of consciousness and you're transmitting it. And if you find your path, it's very pliable. Do you use that type of consciousness for physical healings, or is it more?
No, I don't do healings. That's not my role. I basically, I just do what Thomas tells me to do. He's my guide.
It sounds like me and Latsu. That's exactly how I am.
Yeah. And so what they want me to do is to stay sort of below radar, but to get all this teaching set up. I've been doing a podcast now for almost 11 years. I do a weekly blog post, which goes to 7,000 some odd people. And so I have a following, but they want it to be limited until everything is in place. That's what they've told me. And they've said everything is going as it's supposed to go, and that's all I need to know. I'm on a need to know basis. They really don't want to tell me very much. Although this is one thing which I think is funny. When Thomas first came out to me in 2015, and as soon as I wrote the book, and they had the book vetted. Actually, he had the book vetted by spirits. A group of spirits included Jesus's mother and stuff. And they said it was perfect, but of course it would have been if he, all he was doing was, being the fingers. But after that, he said, we're going to be working more openly together. And I just have one question to ask you, and they must always ask this. Would you mind being martyred? I said, oh, well, I suppose, no, if that's what's is that going to happen? He said, we don't know yet. And I'm thinking, why don't they know? Don't they have like a bigger plan set up? Who's going to be martyred, who's not? But they must have asked all the people who have been martyred, you are a sacred being. Do we have your permission for this to happen? And that reassures me so much to know that they do that. I mean, the love that is, and I'd say this at the end of every one of my podcasts. I say, you cannot imagine the love that there is for you. Not just, just from God, but it's everywhere. And as you know, if you've been in the astral, that's what you breathe. It's everywhere. It's just astonishing how much love there is for each of us. But all those people, and there have been millions who've been martyred for Christianity. They must all have been said, "All right, I'm in for it."
Yeah,
Should have said no, but no, I was sort of dazzled by the whole thing. I just channeled Jesus. I was pretty sure that was Jesus. There was no other way it could have been anybody else. So,
yeah. I was just going to say, it's sort of a multi-dimensional expression of all things when you get to that ascent. Like, I was talking about this with Tom, and it's like within Nigong, the training that we do in Taoism, you access all dimensions at once. So, while I'm talking to you right now, I'm in the universe. The backdrop that I see is very much simulated with that. My whole body is vibrating and attuning to the energies of the sun. I go to a constellation, I move around. This is a repeatable experience, and I see it with my eyes open. And so this is sort of something that you can separate, but once you refine those skills, you can absolutely obtain that. And for example, if you're channeling or you're taking information from Jesus, that is an access to a higher consciousness. And
he
so
has
you're
channeled to be
operating that.
part of his website, things he wanted to make sure I said there, surprising things. One of the things he came to do was to, far from starting a religion, to move us past the need for any religion. You could see it in what he said too. He was very much against religions when he was, again, they don't teach you that in Christianity, but that was true. But he came to abolish religions and to get us working much more closely with the divine, with spirit.
Yeah, I mean, it is just being in that default of who you really are, which is, all things. But that is embodied in a few and conceptual to most until otherwise. And that's where finding incredible vehicles like yourself or myself to broaden the scope of someone's viewpoint so it can be a tangible experience. And it's not just this rhetoric, words, talking heads, people just saying stuff, and people sort of resonate with it, but then it can't be repeatable. It can't be shown. It can't be developed, which is so really important from a humanist perspective, as as we spoke about originally, is like you want it to be true to you, and to be true to you, it can only be validated
I
by
want
you.
it to be true to Jesus. I'm happy to get out of the way. If he just wants me to be his hands on earth, I'm happy to do that.
And so this relationship, do you spend time with God at all, or God in that transmuted way that people have assumed this persona that he's this, almighty old
No,
great
he's very intimate. What I figured out probably 8 or 10 years ago is that everything is known to God. Every thought, every the most vile thing you might ever have thought, it's all God knows it all. So what I started to do was I opened the top of my head, literally opened physically the top of my head, and invited God to come in. And the first thing, I wrote a blog post about this. The first thing you do is you clean up your living room. You really do, because that's your living room inside your head. So after I got it neat enough, so I felt got in, please come in, God, and let's talk. And if you do that, first clean up your living room, then open the top of your head and invite God in. It's not like God is far away, because God truly is already within you. I tell people, God is as close to you as anybody has ever possibly been or could be, and God knows your every thought anyhow. So take advantage of that. Invite God inside.
Yeah, yeah. No, I just fundamentally resonates with me just that embodiment and embracing of that very thing, which is all is one, one is all. And so,
Yeah. But God works with you too. I mean, if you part of the things people say, "Oh, you're so lucky you have this relationship with your guide," but he doesn't shout. He has a couple of times, but most of the time it's a whisper. And I've shown people, a lot of people, how to start to have that relationship, but they don't have the patience to listen, which is what you mostly have to do. For that still small voice, what I tell people to do is the first thing you do is you ask if there's a name that your guide would like to be called. And if you don't immediately hear a name, then you give your guide a name. And usually I think they're cross-gender, but not always. But then I tell them, now ask your guide to step outside your body, because right now it feels as if they're in your head and you can't tell what your guide is saying from your own thoughts. But they'll go outside your body, and in my experience, they go outside your body to right behind your dominant shoulder. So I'm left-handed. When Thomas talks to me, I generally hear him from behind my left shoulder. But I have to listen, and very respectfully, or the clamor of, I had to stop watching TV 20 some years ago, because you don't want that garbage in your head. I mean, yeah. But really, I don't even care about politics. I think there's political stuff going on, and my husband talks about it. I don't care. And if you do that, and you're just talking to, and ask him questions, your guide will answer you, but very softly. Listen for that still voice, that quiet voice, and you will get your answers. But most people don't have the patience to develop that kind of relationship.
mm.
Do
So
you teach that? Do you teach how to have a relationship with your guide?
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I kind of have this sort of processes where I'll give people the last 9 lives that they've experienced up to this one. And then I'll go through the current guides that are surrounding them, transmuting their very level of consciousness, because they're all representative of where they are in their own ascension, their own conscious level. And they come and go as you start to raise your consciousness, and you
That's right.
fire one and a new one comes in, and it's sort of a
For a
continual
season or a reason, they
process.
come and go, except your primary guide. Yeah.
Right, right. And then, that relationship is really important. And then distinguishing the difference between that relationship and your intuitive knowing, because they're two separate things.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
that's the problem, and people have to ask their guides to please get out of my head and onto, just someplace near my body. And as I say, my experience has been, for me and for everybody who's tried this with me, behind your dominant shoulder is usually where they go.
And that's really important to find a repeatable processes
Yeah.
that and then you can discern or affirm. And from what I can hear you say, I have like a very clear sort of clear visual, clear audio. So I see and hear my teachers as if I'm looking at you, and that's just part of the transmuted level of clear senses that I have. But
Mhm.
some people will not develop these skills, are all variable until otherwise, and I tend
Right.
to help
I've
people.
never tried to develop any skills. That's the thing. They've developed them in me. They apparently, in order to prove to Jesus that I could channel, Thomas, who in his next to last lifetime was Thomas Jefferson, um, channeled through me the best thing that I think to read that I have ever written, which was an autobiography of Jefferson during the Revolution, when he also had a fantastic marriage, and she died at the end of the Revolution. But that was channeled. I didn't even know at the time what channeling was. That was in the late 80s when he first did that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is. It's so different from what it was and where it is today. And then I just would always recommend that you get a little bit more insight, and it's not necessary. I mean, both Roberta and I literally, I actually went with intention of learning channeling. I absorbed Latsu the first time I did it. My teacher that had 60 years in the game of channeling almost cried. He couldn't believe that it happened instantaneously for me. It's like, hey, look, I don't know. It just you should. I
That
take
was your
face
life
value.
plan. This
Pardon
is
me?
your life plan, and you're following your life plan.
Yeah, it was this kind of like I
Keep the
attribute.
ball in mind.
Yeah, I attribute it to sort of like uh, face value. So whenever I was given anything in relation to this, I would just accept it. I'd be childlike in my nature. I'm not looking to dissect it from a intellectual
Not at
processes.
all.
Just just as you kind of, it's so funny. I chuckle with you when you go, I don't know what's going on. I just follow direction. That's
Yeah.
exactly how I am with my guides, with Latsu and the three pure ones. I don't I don't question it. They give me the information. I follow it, and it's evident in my very expression of my experience here on Earth. And I can look back the timeline of my whole life and go, if I don't have enough evidence to validate the very expression that I'm experiencing right now, then I don't have anything. And there's thousands of events that I can correlate
Oh,
up to the
sure. Oh,
moment
sure.
that
Yeah.
make it true to me, not just a processes that I'm going through, but you can transmute it into your 3D reality through manifestation, magic, healing, and it's real. And it's not just real to you, you can show it to others. And that's really the
Objectively
fundamental
real.
thing.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
I couldn't do any of the stuff I'm doing now without them.
right.
And I've learned to rely on them so completely because, frankly, if I step 1 inch out of where I'm supposed to be, I know I'm gonna screw up, and I don't wanna screw up. So I just do what they tell me to do.
Right. You listen, and there's no question. I mean, some people might look at us and go, "Well, that's blind faith." Well, it's also a faith that's a knowing. It's
No,
not
it's not blind, it's wide open eyes.
well in the sense that we're not questioning anything in relation to our experience, but
Yeah,
it's validated through that, and I can show it over and over again in my own reality, and that's the most important thing. That's when you know you're
yeah.
in that groove, and the insight of information is fundamentally just crazy. I mean, I've built, anything. People come to me for the craziest stuff, and you from scratch without any resource or any not using the internet, you can build infrastructures of business plans, businesses, this, that, whatever. It doesn't matter, and the information just instantly comes to you, and you're like, there's nothing on the internet or AI that could even come close to the type of information that you get direct
No,
source. It's second
no.
to none.
Yeah. No, I'm certain everything that has happened to me has actually happened, and I'm just trying to do what they want me to do. That's all. I just wanna be that little servant in that little spot, and I think that's what everyone should be. I don't understand the wish to channel. I guess I don't understand why people would want to do it, but everybody is different. I mean, maybe it makes sense to other people. Maybe that's their journey, and
Mm.
so it makes sense that they should try. But I've never tried. I've never said, "Okay, Jesus, I'm ready." Uh, but he does. If he wants me to do something, he certainly makes it clear.
Yeah, your sensitivity to the information is evident in your very expression. And it's sort of like, why would people want to channel? Well, most of the time, I always remind people one of the main reasons why you should definitely look into the idea of channeling is because all thoughts of your mind are not yours. And people are like, whoa. what does that mean? Well, you're just processing a lot of different things that are going in and out of this physical flesh that you perceive as your body. And that information is coming from all different types of sources. So when you create a direct line to pure source information, i.e., Lao-Tzu, Jesus, God, you're able to repeat it and know that it is true. And when you get direct source information, your life becomes very effortless. It becomes
So they
extreme.
channel the aspect of God or Jesus or Lao-Tzu that is part of their minds? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's an expression of the oneness. So, Lao-Tzu is
Okay.
really another transmuted facet of the Tao, which we consider the mother of all things. So there's a level of information that I receive on this earth plane that comes in the form of the very image of Lao-Tzu, and then that Lao-Tzu is transmuted as an eternal immortal version, which we define as supreme purity, and the grade of information just continues to ascend. And really it's relevant to whatever the situation is, or the individual, the person, place, or thing. But more often than not, 99.999% of the time, the information says at such a high frequency, which would be representative of God or Jesus because of the resonance. It's so mind-bogglingly accurate to whatever is necessary for that individual, place, person, or thing instantaneously, and can be validated through their very experience, that it's mind-blowing. So the variables are just transmuted depending upon what it is. And so in me defining that, it's all Tao. It's all Tao. But there are variables, like just as I perceive when I've encountered Jesus, or you call him Jesus, or Jesus Christ. I've only ever seen him as Jesus Christ. He comes in a very, very profound, very high resonance, and it's always in gold and white. And it's extremely, it burns your eyebrows. It burns. It's like looking into the sun.
Yeah, that's right. It is.
And it's undeniable. And I've seen it in probably hundreds of people that I've worked with over the years, because I don't limit myself to anybody. It's like you can be Jewish, Catholic, Christian, Hindu. The only people that have never ever stepped on my doorstep are Jehovah's Witness, and probably understandably due to their belief system, that they're not interested, because they have a very closed-minded, in my opinion, a closed-minded view of reality.
Yeah, I know.
And whereas every other belief system, they end up getting to a point where I think this way, and now I've added a little bit of this viewpoint of what you call Taoism, and I look at my life in a different way. All I do is say to you, use this as a template to enhance your reality. Now, if that's you still believing in Catholicism, which it's almost impossible. I've never seen a Catholic who gets exposed to Taoism and then goes back to Catholicism. It's almost impossible, because they're like, hang on a second, I've been suffering and I've been told that I'm a very horrible person. And now you're giving me, because most people categorize Taoism and Buddhism in the same sort of Eastern philosophy type of thing, but it's very different. So Buddhism is basically a pile of dirt covered in diamonds. And a Buddhist will spend his life walking through his life looking for more, pull off another diamond, look for more dirt, as much pain and suffering as possible, till the end result of this physical demise, going off into another life, potentially not having another reincarnation, staying enlightened. But that's the purpose of his consciousness. Whereas a Taoist believes life is a pile of diamonds covered in dirt. You take off some more dirt and you find another diamond. And the realization is, it's good to be me. The old philosophy or understanding of reality, glass is half full or glass half empty. How do you perceive your reality? And, the universe doesn't have a moral compass. So, you transcend that, you ask for it, and it will give it to you this present moment. And so it's such a fascinating journey that we all go on, and how that's translated into how you perceive all things. And I always tell people there's no right or wrong way up the mountain. The first time you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. And so you kind of get to this point where if I had a penny for how many people I've transitioned over my lifetime, I just did a couple just last weekend. It's not a fire sale, but I've transitioned dozens and dozens of people that have their friends and family have been around them on their final breath, and there's a fundamental, profound, euphoric discharge that takes place as they
Oh,
literally
yeah.
turn the lights off. And if you can see the visually, if you can see it, or you close your eyes, you can see it. I see it with my eyes open. They literally turn the energy centers off as they're leaving, and they close the door, and they're off,
Yeah.
and they're out, and they're ready to go. It's a whole new reality.
It is. Yep.
But this is part of the whole thing, and it's so exciting when I hear your messaging and how God and Jesus works through your very teachings and sharing with people and having them embody and realize that they've gone beyond hope. They have a knowing when they listen to the things that you want to share with them, that they can find this fundamental knowing from here, that
Mhm.
there is this present. It's not this presence of Jesus and God is very tangible. The resonance is extremely palpable. And when you allow yourself to be in that resonance, that frequency, they will come to you, they will embody you, they will share with you, they will expand you, and you'll have the most incredible experience on this earth. May it be your last re-up or not. I don't know.
Well, if we can get people to vibrate high enough, they won't have to come back, because once you're vibrating above a certain level, you can learn the rest of what you need to learn to grow spiritually by not having to come back. You can learn there primarily by being a spirit guide for other people who do have to come back. And that's what happens basically. But
So
people don't want to have to come back. Even if they're happy to be a spirit guide, they don't want to have to come back themselves.
what do you think of the premise of karma? What's your definition of that? Do you believe in it?
I don't think it's certainly not exactly the way the Easterners say it is. But the word balance I like better. If you have negative stuff from your past that is still weighing on your consciousness, it has to reach balance somehow. And one of the ways is by but I mean, two negatives don't make a positive. That's one of the things that bothers me about the karma theory.
Yeah.
So it's not quite that simple, but there is a reckoning, and many people work on this when they're out of body after they have gone home. But there is kind of a sort of karmic-ish balance that people have to achieve. And that's one reason they sometimes come back, maybe to do some especially good things in the same area to try to balance a negative thing they did, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, within Taoism, we kind of use duality as a tuning fork for the human experience. So duality is basically the guardrails that we use this belief system of karma, because karma is only present within a duality, which is the 3D reality you're experiencing, the polarizing effects of positive, negative, up and down, in and out, yin and yang. And then there's that fundamental ascension of that resonance that goes beyond the electromagnetic. And that's when you are at one with all things. That's when you can, shift and do and create and be the observer or the catalyst, a conduit of what people would perceive as miracles, manifestations, all that kind of good stuff. But the duality aspect is sort of like this from a Taoist. It's like if you walk under a ladder and you believe you're going to have good luck, you'll have good luck. If you walk under a ladder and you believe you're going to have bad luck, you can have bad luck.
Oh, that's very true. Oh my goodness, you can do terrible things to yourself just with what you believe.
Right. And so that the true core of all of this is, what are you subject to? What are you subject to? It's your belief system. And what is it that's in the core of you that you validate as that is your experience? your experience will determine and shape your belief system. So, you have people that go, why did God do this to me? Why did all these horrible
Oh,
things
yeah, I hear
happen?
that a lot.
Why? Or people will say to me, well, if there's such a thing as Tao or God or whatever, how come people like Hitler existed or
Oh,
Mao
yeah.
or anything of that nature? And I just explain it to them quite simply. It's like the existence of this type of like polarizing identity, i.e., Hitler or Mao specifically, which people don't really understand. Mao slaughtered over 60 million of his citizens,
Yeah.
being most of them Taoists, because we were the advisors to the emperors over the history of China. So they always had their advisor, their Taoist alchemist, the mystic spiritual Taoist priest that would take deeper insight into these levels of consciousness. And so, of course, you don't want to have someone with far higher insight than yourself. So we better murder them because they might potentially have control over an oversight or do something else of that nature. And I mean, it's just incredible. Mao slaughtered 60 million of his citizens. Hitler murdered millions and millions of
I know.
Jewish people, and the reason they fell is quite simple. And people are like, well, what? Why? How did they? What happened? Because they stopped believing their rhetoric. And the second you buy into you not believing in what you're believing in, and you start falling back into the default of the positive and negative, the deep seated inside your unconscious is the fact that you do believe in this karmic balance, and then the universe will give it to you. It's like, oh, well, if you really believe it, this is where these megalomaniacs and psychopaths and murderers and they perform these acts of like unfathomable, like acts on humanity that are just, you can't even put into words, but they happen because there's a point where they believe it and then they stop believing, or they truly didn't believe. And I have this evidentiary within people that come to me with like cancer. I've got cancer, I've got 6 weeks to live. I've got cancer, I've got 6 weeks to live. Two people with the same problem. And I'm like, okay, and what's the difference between one person and the other, and why one person died in 6 weeks and the other person didn't? Was they didn't believe what they were saying. They were just telling you what you want to hear. And that's fundamentally different. And that knowing comes from the core of yourself. Does this make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense.
Yeah. And so that's the reason why, all these lower frequency energies will always fall under the polarizing effects of high ascension, i.e., Jesus, God, Tao, Buddha, however you want to see it, because that resonation is so high that when you're in that presence, at a certain point, you have to conform or you will unravel. It's like you either fall into the oneness or you expand into the oneness, or under the circumstances of your own making, your own demise due to your emotional content, and you frame that as if it's your reality when it's really a lie, that all of a sudden you'll just unravel because the frequency is so high. And I imagine, and I don't imagine, I can feel it, that when you go and do your teachings as Jesus teachings and all the things that you're being taught from Jesus and God, that there's a frequency that is undeniable that is present within the groups that you share this material with, and it is palpable, it's compelling, it's beautiful, it's blissful, it's completely expansive, and that's part of that frequency. It's undeniable. When you're in the presence of it, there's second to none.
The people who are taking this course are very happy with it. They want me to give an upper level course when this one is done, and I think I probably will, because there are higher levels I could teach, but this is just let's rescue you from having to keep coming back. If you really want that, we've got it. If you want to learn more, we've got that too.
Right. And so you mentioned the course is what, 3 weeks, 6 weeks?
It's 3 months.
Okay, 3 months. Okay.
But we meet on Wednesdays. We call it Wednesday with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I laid it out ahead of time so that it was paced in a way which has worked out pretty well. I changed it a little bit, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them, those who took it seriously, I'd say that's probably 80% of them,
Mm-hmm.
have I can see the change in them, and they can see it in themselves, and they're very happy with that. And we haven't finished yet. We've still got some more to go.
Wow. Wow. And so it spans. So when you're just with Jesus and God, do you sort of gravitate to any sort of like processes of any kind that you repeat on a daily basis, or it's
No,
just
I'm a servant. I mean, Thomas performs a service for Jesus, my spirit guide, which is to maintain, he calls it balance,
Mhm.
help him to maintain his human side, which is very hard when someone is as high a level being as Jesus is. But he wants to be able to stay in touch with what it is to be human. So
Mhm.
they're brothers from a 6,000 year ago lifetime, and they play like brothers, and they beat each other up, and they do all that stuff. And I only have seen it a couple of times, because most of the time he's been taking me along to the astral. I now understand, ever since I was born, because he's my spirit guide. He's not supposed to leave me alone. So he has to go help Jesus. So he takes me along, but they just give me amnesia for the experience. Once in a while, out of the blue, I'll be aware that Jesus talked to me while I was there. And I'll know what he said, and I'll be able, if I think about it, to remember the circumstances. Jesus wanted me to remember some things he was telling me, usually practical stuff. He thinks of me as his assistant somehow. But that's it. I mean, I don't pal around, not on that level at all.
Wow. Wow. Because a lot of people, I've never ever, through my own training and experience, I've never bought into this sort of like processes, because it's like it's ride or die. It's that that's my every breath,
Oh,
every
no. Jesus's teachings are so simple, and if you just follow them and do what he came and actually taught people to do. I mean, think about it. These people, after he died and rose from the dead and was resurrected, most of them went on to die martyrs' deaths. They were so determined to spread his truths. That's how much he affected people back then. So they all ended up on crosses or beheaded or burned. All of them. Glad to do it.
well, it's undeniable, the driving force. Do you think that's sort of representative of Christianity today?
No, this was 300 years before there was ever a Christianity. Jesus was, and is, he still is, extremely charismatic. You can't, you'd pick him out in a dark room. Even if he had all his lights off, very charismatic. And he taught them things which transformed their lives. It transformed them spiritually. You don't forget that. And he said, go and teach this to the world. And they did. And they taught millions of people before the Romans came along and tried to wipe it all out. They were being persecuted most of that time. If you got caught by the Romans, you probably were going to end up helping to light the Appian Way while you burned on a cross. That's how bad the Romans were during those 300 years. But they were still determined to teach about Jesus. It's quite remarkable. There's a book in the Bible that's called the Book of Acts, or the Acts of the Apostles, and it gives some very touching and amazing stories from that period of how they were teaching purely what Jesus taught, as opposed to this business of dying for sins and all that stuff. No, nothing scary, all joyous, all wonderful.
So, how was he represented 300 years before Christianity? What would give anyone reason to want to murder his followers if he was just spreading this word of love?
Because they wanted their own religion to prevail. They wanted fear. They wanted control. Control is a huge thing in religions. And he taught freedom. He taught, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
I've
Of
heard
course
that
they
one.
wanted to kill him. Of course they wanted to kill anybody who said that. Yes.
Right.
And the way he was depicted on the in the Roman catacombs. There's no cross, by the way. Millions of people are buried there, and there's not a single cross there because it all was before Constantine. No cross. And he was depicted there as a young man with curly hair, which is now how he chooses to present himself if you visit him, and in darker skin. He's olive skinned, and he's got around his neck a goat. He's carrying a baby goat. What is that? Why is that significant? Because the way that the Romans set up the religion has Jesus separating the sheep from the goats, and the goats have to go to hell. Well, there is no hell. And before the 300 years had passed, everybody knew that. He came for the sheep and the goats. He doesn't let anybody, die without love, without being rescued by Jesus. He loves the least of us. And all of that, the Romans trashed.
So, with that, knowing that the future ideology or faith or religion based around Christianity with Jesus, if that's not true, how did he die? Was he still, was that the same?
He died on a cross, but he chose that. That was not his planned lifetime.
Right.
He told me this story himself. He said that he could not convince these primitive people he was teaching. One thing he could never convince them of was that their life was eternal. They won't believe it, because at that time the custom was to lay out bodies in caves when people died, and after a few years you'd go back and there was just bones left, right? And they would put them in what's called an ossuary, which is a bone box, and label it with the person's name and put them on shelves. A lot of ossuaries. So they knew what happens when you die. You rot away and you get stuck in an ossuary. Don't tell us we don't die, Jesus. So what could he do? The only thing he could think to do was have a very public death. How do you do that? You make the Romans mad enough, and especially the Jewish clergymen. Oh, they were just ready to kill him. And then you give yourself up. And he was guarded by archangels that were invisible to people. He had to get them to stand down, which was not easy, but he did. Which is why he says at one point, what why do you think I'm doing this? What did he say? He said, at any moment I can get 12 legions of angels to come here and rescue me. So I'm doing this out of my own volition, when he was before the Romans and about to be killed. But anyway, so he died, and he died at a time of his own choosing. And he died before they went around and broke the legs of the people still on crosses who hadn't died. Had to do that because it was Friday, and they had to have everybody die that same day. And usually it's a longer death if you're crucified. So he made himself die very early, and already dead, taken down, wrapped in the shroud, which, by the way, is the real thing, and we know that for sure. Another story altogether. And they laid him out in a new tomb where no one ever had been laid out before, but they laid him out because he's got to rot away, right, before we put him in the ossuary. And then he rose from the dead. And he rose from the dead using a force of energy so strong that those who have analyzed the scorch that's on the Shroud of Turin say that we could not even today produce that scorch. And so that's what he did. And he walked out of that cave and he said, ta-da! I didn't die, and neither will you. And that was what made those people really believe, my goodness, he's real. He really is real, because look what he did. And within a couple of days, he says he had to discard the body. It was already pretty rotting. And but he just gave himself what we use in the afterlife and in the astral plane, which is a body that's made out of a pure material, which is a lot like alabaster. except it's living. It's a living material. And nobody told the difference. Everybody recognized him as Jesus. That's what happened. But that's why he did it.
Wow. Wow. So I love hearing the stories about just everyone's exploration of how they get to consciousness. And my relationship with Jesus and God has always been really profound whenever I come across them within someone's experience, and they are incredible, searching energies for healing, and watching that healing is really something else, because it's instant, as it should be, because that's really how it works. But this has been very interesting, my friend. Wow, I don't know. I'm just excited to have had you here on the podcast, exploring all these incredible things, especially in more detail, your relationship with Jesus and how he transmits his message through you when you use it to create all these incredible materials to help people awaken themselves to a higher level of knowing from their relationship with God and Jesus.
It's all Jesus's work, though. I'm just his hands.
Incredible stuff. I would ask you in closing, what is your definition of consciousness?
I'll give you Thomas's if I can remember it, because I had no idea. Thomas says, consciousness is an energy-like potentiality without size, without form, alive in the way your mind is alive, highly emotional, and therefore self-aware.
Wow.
That's what Thomas said. I said, oh, okay, sounds good to me. I would add highly creative, because everything around us was created by consciousness and is continuously being created by consciousness in a reality that has no time.
Yeah. It's so funny, Lao Tzu refers to consciousness as being the second you as a human being stop identifying yourself as a grain of sand and asking the beach, what are we doing today? And you embody the beach.
That's cute.
Everything is realized. And I would want to ask you in closing, what are you offering my audience today? What are you doing today, Roberta, in relation to your training, your books, all the things that you're offering in the universe?
What am I doing today?
Yeah.
Well, when we leave this podcast, I will be preparing my notes for lesson number 9 out of 12, because I'm giving it this evening. It's a Wednesday. We're doing this on a Wednesday, and Wednesday with Jesus starts in a couple of hours. So
fantastic. And so I'm going to put all your social media and anything of that nature under this podcast. And so with that, they can find your teachings on your website. Where can they find more material on Roberta and Jesus?
Well, robertagrimes.com is my website. I'm terrible at, I hire someone to maintain my professional Facebook, and I don't do anything else really with any of that. But I do, if people put their name in, they will get my blog post every week. And that I sort of really cut loose there. And that's where a lot of people find me. They just go, they put on the green contact block, I think that's where it is, on robertagrimes.com. You can just put your website, your email information in, and then you'll get it every week. By automatically, you'll get my blog post. In addition, Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes is my podcast, and you can find that just about anywhere. Just look for Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I used to tell everybody I have such a great face for radio that we're not in video form, but now we are. So now you can find it in video too.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, again, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing time with me today, and for sharing time with the audience, and thank the audience for sharing time with us.
Yes, it's been lovely. And thank you. And if you have questions about any of this, info@robertagrimes.com. And I answer every question.
Oh, fantastic. Again, thank you, Roberta. I want to thank the audience. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master Sun Qing. And I'll see you on the next one, guys.